What up, everybody? This is the Dr. Football Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dennis Teehan. With me, as always, the CEO of HedgeBettor himself, Justin Fein. Justin, what is going on, my man? How are you this evening?
Oh, good. It's another cold, rainy day in March. I thought we were starting to get some warm weather, but it's been freezing the last week.
Yeah, I mean, this is the worst time of year, I think, to be in New England because you've had a taste of spring weather.
Yep.
You want more. And then you take two steps back and it's basically winter again. And if you look, it's going to be really nice this weekend. And then next week, it's going to get cold again, supposedly. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, 100%. But hey,
March Madness, though. How's your bracket doing?
Not bad. We'll see. I got Arizona winning it all. So it's funny. So look, I know everybody tries to take their expertise and their knowledge every year and pick their games and pick their winner. My gut told me that UConn's going to win it all. But I listened to a guy who's known specifically for his statistics and his analytical picks. And he made a March Madness bracket based solely off of math and statistics. And he said to take Arizona to win it all. So I'm gonna be the guinea pig. I took Arizona to win it all. We'll see what happens.
You know, in the Vegas odds, Arizona got a number 2 seed. But if you look in the Vegas odds, they're ahead of UNC.
I did.
Better odds.
I did. You notice that? Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So I'm kind of a UNC fan because my wife is a Tar Heel UNC alum. So I've been rooting for them. I'm in first place in my bracket. There's no analytics. It was pure dumb luck, stupid dumb luck, a broken clock being right twice a day. And I picked Purdue because I just think that 7'4" kid is kind of cool to root for.
Yeah, he is.
So I don't feel like we've seen many tall ass people like that do well. So I picked Purdue, even though I root for UNC.
Yeah, it really is a crapshoot this year. I mean, like I think UConn's the best team in college basketball, but I heard there's never been a repeat champion, something crazy like that. So I don't know. I mean, odds are stacked against them, I guess. But yeah, Purdue's a great choice. North Carolina, Houston, like there's a bunch of good teams out there. It's been exciting so far, I gotta say.
It's been a very good tournament. It really has. There's been a lot of entertaining, something to fill the void, in this kind of like dreary time of year. But this is a football podcast, so let's get to talking about the NFL. This is the place to be for all the best Patriots coverage, all the best off-season coverage. And as I feel like I say almost every week, the Patriots are the gift that just keeps on giving in terms of producing content 12 months a year. And it's really amazing, Justin, because like you think about it right now, the Bruins are in first place or second place in the NFL, a run of dominance, the likes of which we haven't seen in decades in Boston, favorite to win the title. And the Patriots still drive the conversation in this town pretty much every day, 300 days a year. I feel like the Patriots are the principal top topic in town. And it's just like for all the talk about how bad they've been the 4 years since Brady has left, if you really think about it, there has not been any loss of interest in this franchise. Like people are still into them 12 months a year, talking about the Patriots. It's the end of March. Basketball tournament, Celtics, Bruins. Patriots are still the top topic in town.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that speaks to the type of fans that we got here in New England, in the Boston area. I mean, you know, I think everyone forgets. I mean, you know, I think we all put up with especially, you know, people older than myself. I mean, you know, I kind of came into age when we were becoming Title Town. But like, look, a lot of the Boston franchises has spent a lot of time in a drought. You know what I mean? And we still have, you know, we've always been known to have one of the most passionate fan bases around. So, you know, I'm glad to see that a couple years haven't really changed that, you know?
One of the things I think about a lot, though, is like, and I think you see this a little with the Dallas Cowboys. They went on their runs of dominance and they built this like megalith, this like fan favorite, one of the most popular franchises in North American sports. And it's almost like they collapse under the weight of those expectations now for the better part of 3 decades.
Yeah.
And like you go on a run like the Patriots went on for 20 years. And now you have this rabid, massive international fan following. And, you know, it creates like so much pressure and so much expectation on this franchise. And let's face it, they may never meet that level of success ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, when the opening episode of the Dynasty, when they were kind of queuing everything up, and it was the most appropriate song ever playing in the background, right? Under Pressure. And it really is like this,
Totally.
this franchise. Not only, people think they were under pressure when they were winning, but I mean, I almost look at it and I say, hey, like they're really under pressure now to kind of get back to where they were before. When you're winning Super Bowls, a down season or a down couple of seasons. I mean, like I said, we always talk about how we win a decade in between Super Bowls here in the Brady and Belichick era. I mean, the fact that we had won 3 prior to that and we were still winning and doing well in the regular season kept everybody going, right? It's like now we need to prove that we can do that again. And I think the pressure is really on just as much now as much as it's ever been.
It's like they built this monster and the monster is hungry, and the Patriots just can't feed the monster enough to satisfy it anymore. And I think to a lesser extent, or to definitely, you've seen this with Dallas and maybe a little bit even with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where it's like you build these super rabid fan bases, and it's like it's just like the weight of those expectations becomes forever a part of the future of those franchises once those dynasty years are over. All right, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the franchise now, Justin. We're going to start with the kickoff. That's the opening take to set the table for the rest of the podcast. And I thought we could begin this week with just a little bit of a post-mortem on free agency, let's face it, free agency is pretty much over. Obviously there'll still be a few signings as players shake loose between now and the start of the season. But by and large, your A-level free agents, your top players, are pretty much all accounted for now as we embark into April and the focus has turned to the draft. I guess when I look back on the approach to free agency, and I'll be curious to hear what you think about this, the Patriots famously had a poster on the wall in the front office during the Belichick years that said, "We are not collecting talent. We are building a team." And even though Bill Belichick is long gone, if I take a step back and I look at what they did this offseason, the players they brought in, I think they're all good additions. I think they're all guys that fill roles of need. Yep. I think they're all guys that are going to fit in here and maybe even meet a higher potential here than they were at their previous destination. And it just strikes me of, frankly, a Bill Belichick type free agent class. That's really what this was. You needed a third down back who could catch. You brought in Gibson. You needed a tight end that could be another target. You brought in Austin Hooper. You needed a swing tackle in case your starters got hurt or you need a spot starter. You brought in Okorafor from Pittsburgh. This was a draft. This was a free agency class that was very Belichickian, even though Belichick is gone. And I'll say one more observation about that, and that is that even though he is gone, a lot of these guys, their formative years, I'm talking Elliott Wolf, Matt Grove, yep, Gerard Mayo, countless other people in that front office, right? They are very much Belichick proteges, Belichick influencees. Yeah. And I think that his way of doing things resonates still in how they approach free agency this year.
I mean, 100%. It's like, you can get rid of them, but the effects, they still linger on, right? You don't just get rid of Bill Belichick and then all of a sudden just have a whole new identity overnight, a whole new philosophy overnight. Like that's something that takes time, right? Like, we talked about, the Patriot way, right? The Patriot way is something that's going to be part of Foxborough long after, Bill and Tom, just because of the standard that was set, right? And so you have all these guys who were here with Bill. You have all these guys who kind of, like you said, they came into the organization under a certain philosophy. You can't just expect overnight for them to snap a finger and for that to all change and go away. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't really even hate what they did. I wish they did more to move the needle, but I just think if you look at what they did, they strengthened the middle of their roster. That's what they did. And that's what Belichick always would do. I mean, Belichick had a few, he every now and then he'd bring in a Dallas Thomas or something like that. But by and large, the majority of the years he was here, how did he approach free agency? He wanted to fill roles and strengthen the middle class, if you will. And that's exactly what they did this year. It's exactly what they did this year.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, I will say there, like, let me put it this way. I saw rumors the other day that the Patriots were potentially linked. They said to keep an eye in terms of, guys like T. Higgins, guys like Justin Jefferson as potential, trade acquisitions. That to me was my first glimpse of like, oh, this is a post-Belichick era, right? Because like to your point, everything we've done up until now has been very reminiscent of the way we've done things, right? But then hearing like, oh, they might bring in a superstar wide receiver and pay him, like that was the first time I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of a little different, right? But I mean, nothing's happened yet. It sounds like Justin Jefferson might resign back in Minnesota. Still not sure what's going to happen with T. Higgins. But I mean, yeah, there really hasn't been much that's made me say, okay, this is a new regime. This is a new day. It really has kind of felt a lot of the same.
Yeah, the only thing that's really different is they signed their own guys. I mean, I think that is quite a bit different.
Yeah.
And I think it was different that they went all in on Calvin Ridley, if that is indeed true. And I believe it is, based on Kraft's comments this week. I don't think he would lie about that. I mean, that's not something Belichick would do. So there were some subtle differences, of course, but I just think if you look at the way they approach player acquisition, I mean, you just think of that poster. We're not collecting talent. We're building a team. Well, that's what they did this year. The guys they actually ultimately, decided to actually bring in and pay for. It really just hit that to a T.
I agree. And I mean, you could make the argument that with what they've done, to your point, to strengthen like the middle of their roster, it's probably just as impactful as bringing in like a singular big money, big name free agent, right? Like, I mean, a single guy can only do so much. He can't play every position, right? So, I mean, this was a roster that had a ton of holes. We both said, we've said for a long time, like this, it's not like this roster is one receiver away or a quarterback away from competing for a championship. There was a lot of holes to fill. And I think they started to slowly plug away.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think that there was no reason they couldn't have done both.
Oh, for sure.
And that's my criticism. Like, because to be honest, I actually like the free agent class. We said this last time, but I just needed the one crown jewel.
Right.
Crown jewel to say, okay, they brought in that one player that's really going to up the talent level here, up the skill level, be that sort of marquee person that I can feel like this is going to be a better team next year. That was lacking. If they had got Ridley, or I'll give you another name, L'Jarius Sneed, who's a defensive player, right? He went last week to Tennessee again.
Yeah, Tennessee again.
Right? And like if they had somehow brought him in, I would have said this offseason was a success because you filled the middle of your roster and you brought in a star caliber player. You're a better team. They didn't bring in that crown jewel, and I think that was my disappointment.
Yeah, I'm hoping, like, just based off of some of their comments, some of the guys that they said they were interested in, that maybe it's not over. I mean, I know a lot of free agents have been signed, but I don't put it past these guys to maybe go out and make a trade or bring somebody in. I think it's going to be super interesting to see what they do on draft night too. I mean, don't forget, like there's always a lot of big moves that get made on the on the first night of the draft, and this is a whole.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say this is we're still kind of exhibiting the same like bias that we were just talking about, where we're like our expectations are based off of the old Patriots. It's based off of Bill Belichick. Like, who's to say that the Patriots won't do something crazy like a blockbuster trade on draft night, or make a late offseason acquisition via trade or something like that. Like there's still, I guess, stuff to be determined.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little about the draft, because I think it kind of ties in with what we're talking about. I have another take on that I was going to run by you and bring up, and that is like, I think if you're looking at like where you want to be as an NFL franchise going into draft night, and I think that the one thing you don't want to have to do on draft night, if you're an NFL franchise, any NFL franchise,
yeah,
is you don't want to have to fill a hole. through the draft. And sometimes it happens, and it works out. I think back to Tampa Bay, the year they brought in Brady, they had a gaping hole at tackle, and they drafted Tristan Wirfs. He ended up being an all-pro caliber player. They win a Super Bowl, kind of worked out. You don't want to have to draft a player, though, generally. And my goal for the Patriots in free agency, my hope was that they would get a representative player, at least a representative average player at each of the positions of need, so that whatever happened on draft night, whatever was the right move to do for the franchise, they could do and still feel like they were going to be able to fill a competitive team. In my opinion, Justin, and you may disagree with this, I don't think they obviously did that. I mean, I think they're going into this draft with multiple gaping holes. I think they're painted into a corner now. I think that it's really hard for me to see a likely scenario where they're going to, in August, have a complete team, and they're not going to have major deficiencies on their roster come training camp next year, unless they absolutely nail this draft. And I just don't think that's very likely. I think they painted themselves into a corner at the end of the day with not filling enough holes in free agency.
I mean, for sure. I think this is...
They're going to have to draft to need, is what I'm saying.
Definitely. I mean, to me, this team, and I'm sure you would agree, they have two major needs, right? Quarterback and wide receiver. Like that to me are the two big gaping holes with the New England Patriots, right?
And tackle, I think too, a little bit. Still offensive tackle. That's I don't feel like that's left tackle is totally resolved. I like the kid they brought in from Pittsburgh, but I mean, I don't think he's definitely the answer.
No, but you know what? Like, you got the number 3 pick, and I think that here's the way I look at this, and this comes back to the whole debate: who should we draft? What should the Patriots do? I look at this and I say those are your 3 biggest holes, right? You say you got tackle, wide receiver, and quarterback, right? The chances of them finding the right guy at quarterback and filling in crossing that off their list of gaping needs, that's a much smaller percentage chance than if they were to take a surefire tackle or a surefire wide receiver, right? So they've now put themselves in a position where their biggest need, quarterback, is also their biggest gamble, right? And if they do try to go in another direction, they're still leaving themselves exposed to your point, at those 2 other positions.
And it's a catch-22, because if you bring in the quarterback with the number 3 pick, you're pushing off the 2 most important positions, right? If you're going to bring in a young quarterback, I mean, you need to protect him, and you need someone to get open. And you're basically not going to be, if you take that quarterback at number 3 this year, you're not going to be able to fill those other 2 positions unless you get really lucky in the later rounds of the draft. And I think that's like the dilemma. They're in a catch-22 right now, and they put themselves in that position by not being more aggressive. And even if they didn't go in and bring in that crown jewel type player in free agency, you get outbid on Calvin Ridley. I mean, I'm sorry. There were other players, there were Curtis Samuels, there were Hollywood Browns, there were other good receivers. Who's the guy that signed to Jacksonville? Gabe Davis. Like, that would have at least been representative players. Tyron Smith went for $20 million. I know he's old. He's got injury history, but he comes in and gives you 12 to 13 games this year. You feel a lot better about your tackle position. They could have done a lot. They could have done more to kind of not have themselves, again, I'll use this analogy, painted into a corner. Now they're in a catch-22. Draft a quarterback, and he's going to be in a tough situation. If you kick the can down the road on the quarterback and you trade down and you pick up assets, you're going to fill other holes, but then you don't have a quarterback and you're rolling with Jacoby Brissett. And who knows when you're going to be picking in the top 5 again? Maybe you win 6 or 7 games now and you don't get there. So it's a tough dilemma they put themselves in, I think.
100%. And I totally agree with you, but and I'm thinking about this in my head, like just to play devil's advocate, right? Like let's look at, you mentioned Tyron Smith, like let's look at the Jets, right? The team in their division. Like I look at the Jets and I see a team that is probably screwed now with Aaron Rodgers. He's talking about to being a potential vice presidential candidate, right? Like that guy's head isn't in football right now, right? They bring in a left tackle who, you know, to your point, like you just said, he's old. He has injury history. He's had trouble staying in the field. They went out and they signed a guy like Mike Williams, who I can't remember the last time he's played more than half a season. Right. And they're spending big money on all these guys.
He had 19 catches last year.
Right. They're spending big money on these guys, and it gives off like this air of desperation. Like, we need to do something now. We need to win now. We need to turn things around now. And it's like, I don't feel confident in any of those three guys on the Jets. Right. So I look at it and I'm like, the Jets tried to address those needs, and I think they might have made themselves worse off by just committing a bunch of, tying up a bunch of capital to these guys who they're probably not likely to get a return from. So I see both sides of it. I don't like the fact that we still have these gaping holes and these glaring needs, but I also like, I wouldn't want the Patriots to go out and spend a ton of money on Aaron Rodgers and Mike Williams and Tyron Smith, right? Because like that's like a Band-Aid to the problem.
Yeah, I understand. I don't disagree with you, but I think there's a distinction and there's a difference. The Jets are trying to figure out how to get from mediocre to the next level of being like a playoff and even a potential Super Bowl team. And I think you're right. I don't know if they actually did that this offseason. We're going to talk about the Jets in a couple minutes. The Patriots right now are just trying to get out of the absolute bottom of the league. And I think that, like you're talking about, can we get from 4 wins to 7 or 8 wins? Can we have a real football season? Can we have a product this year in Foxborough that's actually watchable? Because I'm sorry, last year was not a watchable product. It was the worst, least entertaining product I've ever seen of any Patriots team. I think that there was a middle ground there in free agency where, look, anyone that thinks you're going to turn this Patriots team back into a contender in one free agent class is absolutely delusional. That is not, this team is so far away from that, it's not going to happen. But could they have put in a few building blocks so that we could have a 7 or 8 win team if things go right? I don't even think they really did that, is I guess what my concern is. Like, I feel like unless they really nail the draft, the prospect of like another 4 or 5 win season is very real right now. Like, I don't even think they've gotten back to mediocrity from what I've seen so far. And I think that's the difference right there.
So I think this is where I'm a little different than a lot of Patriots fans, right? Because, or even, pundits, analysts, whatever. I look at a team that has arguably a top 5 defense, and they just brought in a bridge quarterback that we know is capable of competent play, right? He certainly has a ceiling. Don't get me wrong, right? But Jacoby Brissett has showed that he can consistently be average, at least, right? And I look at that and I say, if you got a quarterback who can be consistently average behind a top 5 defense in the league, I don't think you should. I don't think there's a chance you finish near the bottom of the league. I think I think just that formula alone elevates you to a middle of the pack roster. I could totally be wrong, but I mean, I don't know. I look at it and I say, you got an average quarterback who you get consistent play from, and you got a top 5 defense. You should be able to spin that into a 7, 8, 9 win season.
Well, you know who agrees with you? The
Not
Patriots. I think the Patriots agree with you because I think that's clearly what their actions are telling you. They don't think that they're as bad as their record was last year. Right. I think they think that exactly like you think, if Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi wasn't such a disaster last year, they would have won a couple more of those games. They would have had a real season. That is what the Patriots think right now. They think that last year was something of an anomaly, combined with the fact that they had awful quarterback play. They're going to bring in Brissett. Say what you will about him. His quarterback rating the last 2 seasons he started was 92, which is not great, but it's okay. And they believe that they're gonna win some games and have a much better season this year. I agree with you. That's what they think.
And another thing too, not to overlook, is the fact that all signs are pointing to to this season's schedule being a lot more favorable, right? I think last year they arguably had one of the toughest schedules in the league.
That's true.
Maybe the toughest schedule, right? So I look at it and I say, okay, your schedule lightens up a little bit. You still got a top 5 defense, and you brought in a guy who you can get some decent quarterback play from. I look at that and I say that right there alone takes them from a 4-win team to a 7-8 win team. But, I mean, a lot is still up in the air. You now have a new rookie head coach, and, there's nothing guaranteed.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's clear from their actions that they agree with you, and not most fans.
And we're in the minority. We're in the minority because a lot of people don't agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to draft day a little, and given what you believe and the conversation we just had, you're at the number 3 pick right now. You look at a team like the Minnesota Vikings, right? And they have draft capital to potentially move up in the draft. There's rumors they're interested in that. Where are you, Justin, right now on the whole draft the quarterback at 3 that falls to you versus trade? I know that's a tough question to answer because none of us are scouts. The more I think about it, I'm leaning more towards drafting the quarterback that falls to them, because I just feel like the solution to the puzzle we just talked about, like, how do you draft the quarterback but not throw him completely under the bus and put him out there with a bad team and ruin him like you just ruined Mac Jones? What's the solution? And I think the answer is you draft him and you don't expect to play him unless things go really well and you feel comfortable putting him out on the field. So I'm leaning towards drafting him. And I would say this, like, if I'm the Patriots, and I'd love to see what you think about this, and you look at what other teams have gotten to move up into the top 3 picks when there's been potential franchise quarterbacks available, it's been a king's ransom. Minnesota wants that pick.
Yeah. I'm
not even answering the phone unless I'm getting Justin Jefferson, 2 first-round picks, and another pick back. That's where I would begin the conversation. And if you think about it, as steep as that price sounds, if you believe the next franchise quarterback is available in that spot, it would be a small price to pay to have the next Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow on your roster. It really would. And similarly, the other side of the coin, if the Patriots believe that the quarterback that falls to them is the franchise guy, there is no amount of draft capital in the world that's worth passing up on that next franchise guy. Me personally, I think you got to take a swing and draft one of these quarterbacks. What are your thoughts on draft? Stay at 3 or trade down? Where are you right now?
I'm leaning, I would lean trade down. And here's why I say that. I say that because in my mind, there's not even a clear consensus on who the number 2 guy is after Caleb Williams, right? And there's a lot of people who think that Caleb Williams isn't even necessarily going to be the best quarterback. So I look at that and I say, well, there's talks about McCarthy at Michigan. There's talks about Drake May. There's talks about Jaden Daniels, right? So I look at that and I say, if there's not even a clear consensus, this should be the second guy off the board. I almost look at it and say, well, there's a clear consensus who the best tackle is. There's a clear consensus who, the best receiver is. I look at it and I just think there's so much risk with taking one of those guys at the third overall pick. I mean, it'd be different if you had the first or second pick, but you're in a position where you're saying, well, we'll take the best guy available, and we don't even know who that's going to potentially be, and we don't even know who the second or even first best guy available is. Like, that to me is what's scary. Like, if it was like, hey, these guys, they can't miss. It's very clear. It's bang, then bang, then bang. Like, that would make me feel a little better. But I mean, I'm hearing the other day that the Washington Commanders love McCarthy at number 2. You know what I mean?
That's the latest rumor.
That's the latest rumor. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, if these guys like McCarthy enough that they would jump Drake May and Jaden Daniels for them, then are Jaden Daniels and Drake May all that worth that pick? Like that to me, it starts to create these
Right.
shadows of doubt, you know?
Yeah, and if you heard, we can get into this now too, because I was gonna, at some point bring this up, but like, which of these quarterbacks you're liking, and that it's like an ever changing thing, and I'm freaking going around like a merry-go-round about which one of these guys I even want the Patriots to get, and
Right.
like the truth is I have absolutely no idea. Nobody does, but like you listen, both May and Daniels had their pro days today, and there was a lot of like negative things on social media about both of their pro days.
I know.
And Daniels didn't do well in his pro day. May, they said, missed a few throws. It's like, it's frightening because so many of these quarterbacks have been complete flameouts in the top 5 draft the last like 10 years. It is a quarterback driven league. And I think teams have never been more desperate to find that guy. And that's why you're seeing teams like the Colts trade up to the top 4 and draft Anthony Richardson when he was a second round pick the whole, March and April last year, because the teams are so desperate. They are literally making these guys into what they want them to be and taking them. And this has been a trend, not just last year, but for like the last 15 years in the NFL. Zach Wilson now is a great example of that. Trey Lance is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson, I think, is actually not going to be a bad player, but he's an example of the phenomenon, hit or miss, where the teams come up and they're drafting these guys way higher than they were expected to be or should be realistically drafted. Are May, Daniels, and Caleb Williams the 3 best players in the draft? Probably not overall, but they're going to go top 3.
Yep.
So it's like you have just such a bad track record and so many questions around each of these guys, and it's just so confusing.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly it. Is I am not convinced, and this is starting with Caleb Williams, right? I am not convinced that any of these guys are the next franchise quarterback, right? And again,
there's no Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning or John Elway this year.
Exactly.
Caleb Williams is not that. I'm sorry, he's not.
Exactly. And so I look at that, and who am I? Like, what does my opinion matter? But my gut tells me that this is actually a down year for quarterbacks, right? And that's kind of my take. And I look at it and I say, look, I'm looking at these guys. I'm not super convinced or super impressed with any of them. And if you're not in a rush to turn things around, Mayo keeps saying, we're going to take our time. We're going to do it the right way. We're going to take our time. We're going to do it the right way. There's clearly, this team isn't a quarterback away, right, from competing. I look at this and I say, why do you rush the need to fill that hole, right? We already said that if they took a quarterback in number 3, they're doing so with the hopes that they don't even have to play him this year, right? So I look at that and I'm like, why are we in such a rush to fill that hole with somebody
I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to give you 2 reasons why. And one of them is legit and one of them isn't. There's an off the field reason why, which is that this team is desperate for face of the franchise. And it's really been 4 years since this is going to be the 5th year since Brady left coming up. Like, I think like it sucks being in NFL limbo. Right. And that's where they are. They're in NFL limbo. They don't have the guy. They don't know who the guy is. There's no hope. They went 5-11 in 1993. It was an entertaining year because they had Bledsoe and he started to play well as the season went on. That was before you were born. But, you can be bad and you can be bad and entertaining. You can be bad and you can be bad and completely unwatchable, which is what they were. They don't have a face of the franchise. So that's the pressure to go out and draft a face of the franchise. Give the fans hope. And then number 2 is, Justin, more rationally, they're going to build this roster and they're going to get better with all these draft picks if they trade down. And now you're a 6 or 7 win team and you don't have the draft capital in future years because you're drafting in the middle of the first round to get the quarterback. Now you're the Cleveland Browns, the Chicago Bears. You're 6-11. You're 7-10. You're 8-9. Maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. You're 10-7. And you win a wild card, but you don't ever really get another swing at that top tier talent guy because you're always picking in the middle of the round because you're a mediocre, middling franchise. You don't bottom out. This is their bottom out year. So maybe this is the year you take that big swing and try and bring in that really top guy.
For sure. And look, I get that argument. I do. I totally do. But I also, I look at like, for instance, like the Denver Broncos of whatever it was 5-6 years ago, right? Back when they brought Peyton in and they won a Super Bowl, right? I look at that and I was like, that was a franchise that they had their fair share of duds that they drafted at quarterback, right? The Paxton Lynches and all the bums that they tried to bring into Denver, right? But what they did in Denver was they built a Super Bowl caliber roster through free agency, through the draft, through trade. And then they went out and they got themselves their franchise quarterback when they were a step away, and they went out and won a Super Bowl, right? And I look at that and I almost think, to me, like, that is a more attractive model. I look at the Patriots, they have a top 5 defense. They have a couple of good players that they can, start to build a team around. And I say, like, why not spend a year or two at really maximizing the capabilities of this roster, solidifying all your holes, getting a couple of absolute studs and, in skill positions, offensive line, etc. And then maybe trying to go out in trade for or a proven quarterback or wait for a proven quarterback to hit the free agency market. Like, to me, that almost is a more attractive and safe option than saying, well, we're gonna roll the dice on one of these kids when we still have a lot left to be desired. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah. And I mean, look, if I was going to argue against what I was saying right now too, it's that there have been some of the best quarterbacks in the league have been taken outside of the top 5.
Exactly. Right.
So, but it's hard because, like, now you're counting on kind of getting lucky, right? You're counting on picking Mahomes at 11 or Drew Brees in the 2nd round or Brady in the 6th round. And, even though you look at it and throughout the league, there are a lot of stories like that. I think in any one instance, it's hard to count on that. Your best chance of getting that top guy is probably statistically the top of the draft. So now you're in a situation where every year, you're taking a flyer on a guy in the 2nd and 3rd round. And it's like, it becomes a tough thing. So I think that, the most likely way you're going to find the franchise guy is in the top 5 of the draft. And at the same time, it's more likely than not the guy you take is going to fail. So it's like,
right.
It's like, good luck. Either way, you're screwed.
Seriously. Yeah, no. So they really are in between a rock and a hard place. I mean, I know, like I said, we've talked about it. There's multiple philosophies. I think regardless of what they do, there's just going to be a significant amount of risk either way. To your point, like if they pass up on if they pass up on a quarterback, then they run the risk of saying, oh, well, who knows if we'll ever get a pick this high again in the near future, right?
Which is why, like, I say just take the guy. If you like the guy, just take the guy. If you don't like the guy, then obviously you trade out. There's a lot of pressure on Elliott Wolf, right? Because he's going to make that call. If you like the guy, I think you just got to take that chance, and there's no guarantee. If you feel like Drake May can turn into that guy, but he's not there yet, I think you take him, and I think you sit him, and you see what happens. If you look at all these guys and you're like, I don't love any of them, then obviously you get out. You get out, and you don't want to draft Trent Dilfer. You don't want to be that franchise that you don't want to draft. Trey Lance. You get out while the getting is good, and let someone else make that mistake. I'll say one other thing to you about this. I don't know if you've been following the stuff with the pro days, but if you look on DraftKings, Jaden Daniels odds to be the number 1 pick is plus 1,200. And I think that would be a great flyer, like $50 on that it just feels like it's all a little too hunky dory and obvious with the Bears taking Caleb Williams. And I don't know. It just feels like they're probably going to take Caleb Williams, but I feel like that's good value there. That they might be, playing their options and seeing if someone will come up and trade them to get that pick. And I wouldn't be totally shocked if Jaden Daniels was the first pick, or even Drake May, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing I'll say about this too is, I think there's a big difference between identifying the guy and him falling to you and you just saying you're going to take who you perceive to be the best guy left when it comes to you, right? Like,
that's true.
You know what I mean? Like if they think that their guy is Drake May or Jaden Daniels, and though that guy winds up going second, right? I hate the idea of them just taking the next man up if that's not the guy that they fell in love with. You know what I mean?
Agreed. So let me ask you this: what about trading up? Like, if by your logic, like we've talked a lot about trading down,
right?
If you identify a guy and it's going to cost you a pretty hefty sum to go from 3 to 1, but if you believe that is truly the guy, maybe you make that move. I don't know, and just like, look, we're not taking any chance. We believe in Jaden Daniels. We're moving up. We're going to offer you X, Y, or Z, and we're going to bring him in. Well,
look, if you're, it would make sense for a lot of the parties. Like if you're the Patriots and the Bears have assured you that, like let's say Jaden Daniels is the guy that you want, and Washington really wants JJ McCarthy. I think that's his first name, JJ McCarthy, right? And you look at that and you say like, okay, well, if I know that Caleb Williams is going number 1 and I can solidify my chances to get my guy at number 2, and I'm swapping picks with the Commanders and giving them maybe a second or something like that, and the Commanders know that their guy is going to be there at 3rd. I think it would make sense for everybody, but there's just so much I think that goes into it. Like, I don't like if you know that Caleb Williams is going to be the number 1 overall pick and you want Drake May or Jaden Daniels, I don't think it makes sense to trade up to number 1. But if you say, hey, I don't want Caleb Williams, I want either Drake, I want Caleb, or it's not Caleb, or Jaden, then I think it makes a little bit more sense to say, I'm going to make sure that I get that guy at number 2, and I'm not going to take the chance that he slips to me at number 3. And I think that, honestly, like, I think it's funny. Like, I know, like, we obviously different time, different era, not really different era, but you go back to that Mac Jones draft, and the Patriots, it almost seemed like they took Mac because he fell to him. They weren't like aggressive. They didn't move up, right? And I look at that and I say, and Mac was, I believe, the 4th or 5th quarterback taken? Fifth. Yeah, exactly. So they, by all accounts, let whoever fell to them fall to them. So I look at this and I say, look, if you know that there's a guy that you want and you can make a move for him, do it. But don't just come into it with the attitude that, we're going to take the best quarterback remaining at the 3rd spot, because that I think is how you get yourself into trouble.
And let me ask you one more question. Are you still a Jaden Daniels guy, Justin? I think that was your top guy. Any wavering on that after some of the negative atmosphere around him after his pro day and maybe not throwing the best?
Well, I'm going to say yes and no, because yes, my gut tells me that he's potentially the best quarterback in the draft class, but no, in the sense that I still don't even feel that confident in him, which I guess is kind of like the basis for everything else that I've said today, which is the fact that I'm not super confident in any of these guys.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's just like any port in a storm, right? I think we're making these guys, and I think franchises make these guys into what they want them to be, and it's just like maybe they're not really worthy of like the hype and the draft position that they're going to be getting. I don't know. Personally, I'll say this though, like I do like Drake May. I do think he's more of a project, but I just feel like his combination of size, speed, mobility, and when I hear him talk, he just strikes me as like a leader, or I don't know, a resilient guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't have a great senior year. And that's the downside. You're like, this cat was really bad at times in the ACC. How's he going to come to the AFC East with this team, and thrive? But I think he has the skill set. I think he has the psychological demeanor, if you will. And if I'm going to take one of these guys, I think he would be the one that I would target personally.
Yeah.
Over the other two. I like Daniels too, but I'm concerned that he's thin.
Yeah.
He's really thin. And I mean, Lamar Jackson has had a lot of injury problems. I think he's about the same size, maybe a little thinner than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. You know, I think I'd go May over Daniels, but I like Drake May. I think he's the best prospect in the draft, but like you said, he's certainly no sure thing.
Exactly. And I think the fact that we're both sitting here going, well, I kind of like this guy better than the other guy. I think that's inherently the problem. Like, I think like if we were both sitting here going, no, this is the clear cut next best guy after Caleb Williams, right? Like that right. Within itself, I think speaks volumes is the fact that like, there's not even a consensus.
But like I said last time, don't forget, we all have PTSD from 2021 because the draft class was so bad.
Right.
You know, Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be the next thing. He is nothing like that. And the other four guys don't even really belong in the league. Two of them just went for 6th-round picks. One of them just went for a 4th-round pick. And one of them, I don't think you can trade him for a used bag of balls. And that's Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like everyone has PTSD from that. And I think that's why everyone's so skeptical this year of this whole quarterback situation. It's like these guys are getting picked to a fault because let's face it, the track record has not been good drafting quarterbacks the last 2 or 3 years. Now, that 2020 class was quite good,
right?
But that seems to be forgotten about at this point because 2021 class was actually that bad that it literally traumatized football America. You know, it really did. And like I said, how bad is it? 2 of the guys just got traded for 6th-round picks. Justin Fields couldn't even get a 6th-round pick this year. He's getting one next year. Yeah. That's how bad he is. I want to talk a little about that though. Let's transition to talking a little about Justin Fields as a bridge quarterback because I did think it was interesting that he got only a 6th-round pick. And look, you might disagree. I forget with me on this one. I think we've talked about this before, but like I'm totally out on Fields. He is more of a reclamation project than Mac Jones. 10-28 career record, 82 QBR. He is a worse player than Mac Jones. I don't see him as having any upside. We talked about this in the last episode of the podcast. Guess what? The league agrees with me and you, I think, about this. And that is this guy wasn't even worth a draft pick in the 2024 draft. That's how lowly the rest of the league views him. So Patriots fans just need to get over this fantasy that Justin Fields is like this reclamation project that's going to come here and salvage his career. And that way you don't have to take a gamble on a quarterback in the draft this year. That's not the case at all. Justin Fields is like a Mega Millions lottery ticket. I mean, he's just as likely to be successful moving forward as Mac Jones is, in my opinion.
Agreed. And I think it's super telling that, look, he immediately was named the backup to a quarterback who was literally kicked out of his last franchise. He's
been ripped apart for the last 2 years.
Right? So like, you know, the fact that he's not even competing with Russell Wilson for the starting job, I think that says everything you need to know as a fan base. I think we dodged a huge bullet by not bringing him in here. I'd way rather Jacoby Brissett. And I
would too. Jacoby Brissett is a much better quarterback than Justin Fields. And don't tell me upside when the guy's been a starter for 3 years and he sucked.
Right. No, I totally agree. Weirdly, I love him as a backup quarterback for this Steelers team.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that. But it's a good fit.
It's a good fit, but I wouldn't want to bring him in as a reclamation project. I wouldn't want to bring him in to have to count on him, and I wouldn't want to give up anything or pay him any big money. So I'm glad we avoided that whole situation. If
you just go on YouTube and like watch some of Justin Fields' lowlights, okay, and like some of the throws, if you thought Mac Jones was bad, and he was, Justin Fields was worse.
Oh yeah,
he was worse. And some of the throws that guy missed, and don't forget one thing, Fields was in a better situation than Mac Jones was. The Bears had more talent than the Patriots the last few years, and I think the coaching. Now we see how toxic things were with Belichick and everything. It was a terrible situation. At least Fields didn't have to deal with that. And still, he was just as bad, if not worse, than Mac. So,
exactly,
you know, it just no sense. Now, if people are looking for a bridge quarterback the Patriots should have been in on, I'm going to give a name. And when you talk about trading down, let me throw this name out there. This is a guy I like. I thought he showed flashes last year in his second year. At one point, he led the league in passing. He threw for almost 4,000 yards, 22 touchdowns last year on a bad team. And that's Sam Howell. Sam Howell went for a 4th-round pick. And if you're telling me that you're going to trade down with a team like the Minnesota Vikings or someone else and pick up 3 or 4 or 5 picks in the next couple of years, whatever, I would feel so much better about that if you had a guy like Sam Howell, who I actually think has legitimate upside in a legitimate ceiling. Okay, I would feel so much better if he was on this team than I would even with Jacoby Brissett, to be honest with you, because I think Howell has a chance to be a good quarterback. And hey, you get Justin Jefferson, say, and you get 2 first-round picks from Minnesota, and you roll with Sam Howell as your quarterback. Like, to me, that's more palatable than bringing in almost someone like Brissett or Justin Fields or Gardner Minshew or any other name you could throw out there.
Yeah, look, a lot of the book is, the book's still out. Sam Howell is he's an interesting guy to me, I think, for sure, because like you said, he did show flashes, he did show potential. But again,
and not just numbers, but he showed stones a couple times. Like, he had a couple comebacks. Remember, he almost beat the Eagles in
couple big games. 2 good games against Philly. Yeah,
against the Patriots, he won that game. He showed some guts.
He did. Yeah. No, I totally look. I totally agree. I would have rathered him than Justin Fields and a bunch of the other guys out there. And I could even go as far as to say that I would rather Sam Howell than the majority of the quarterbacks that we've been talking about in this year's draft. What I wouldn't want is to bring Sam Howell in here with the expectations that he's the next franchise guy. Like, he would have been a great guy. You know what I mean? I think he would have been a great guy to bring in here as like a quote unquote bridge with tremendous upside potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And look, if you're going to trade down and kick the can on taking the quarterback, I feel like Howell would have been the perfect guy to come in here and just kind of like give you some upside, some hope that a lottery ticket that maybe has a somewhat of a chance of actually cashing in.
Yeah.
He only went for a 4th-round pick. I feel like they should have been in on Sam Howell, in my opinion. Okay, let's talk a little bit, Justin, before we wrap it up. A couple things I want to bring up. First of all, the Gerard Mayo, you mentioned this, Gerard Mayo's comments from the coaches' press conference this week. I just have a couple takes on that. He said a lot. If you're a listener watching this and you haven't seen him, go listen to his comments. He said more in that one press conference than I think Belichick has said in entire seasons. And, I thought it was a mistake for him to specifically get into his personal thoughts about Drake May and floors and ceilings. I thought that was just way too much for him to say.
Yeah.
Not in anyone's interest.
Yep.
There is a middle ground between saying everything that comes to mind and saying nothing, which is what Belichick did. And you look at what Mike Tomlin does and how he handles the media, and he says a lot, but he doesn't put people in bad positions.
Right.
And that's what Gerard Mayo needs to learn how to do. But I'm going to tell you this right now. What you're seeing from Gerard Mayo, and you saw it in his comments at the coaches' breakfast last week, is his lack of experience.
Exactly.
He babbles, he rambles, he says too much because he's never been there before. If you think that lack of experience is limited to how he mishandles his press conference at the coaches' breakfast, I got news for you. You're wrong. Wait until training camp. Wait until the regular season. Wait until week 7 in the Meadowlands when he screws up something. This guy is like a single A player. He skipped like 3 steps to get where he is. He is going to have a learning process this year, and his lack of experience is going to be a recurring theme, not just in the press conferences. It's going to be on the field, in the locker room, everywhere. That's what I think.
I agree. I mean, look, every time I've watched him I only briefly caught the comments of the coaches breakfast, but I mean, like, I remember like watching, his introductory presser and, a couple of that have followed. And it's almost in like a weird way, it almost reminds me of like a guy who's like on a date or in like a social situation and he doesn't know what to say. So he just starts like rambling the first thing that comes to his mind, thinking like, oh, this will be a good story. Oh, this will be fun. And it's just like, and you're just sitting there going like, oh, dude, why are you saying that? Like what's the purpose of getting into this? You know what I mean? So it really is almost, that was,
he doesn't know what to do.
Exactly. Because he doesn't know what to do. And I think to your point, like that is super concerning because look, if he's we know he's inexperienced. We know he's a first year head coach. We know he's, the extent of his experience was kind of sharing a coordinator coaching position. Right. So like nobody's expecting him to come in here and have that established experience, be Bill Belichick, but it's almost like he feels the need to try to overcompensate a little bit and say more than needs to be said. And I think, look, this is one instance where he could definitely take a page out of Belichick's book and just learn sometimes you just got to shut up or not say anything at all. And what's not said.
I don't think the Belichick. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just to finish up. Sometimes I think what isn't said is a lot more powerful or a lot more better than going out and saying it or just saying something dumb.
Right. Yeah, I don't think the Belichick approach works all that great in today's NFL.
No, you need a balance. Yeah,
you need a balance. But like you said, you look at again, Mike Tomlin, right? You can say 80% of what Mayo's saying, but just key points you got to pull back.
Exactly.
And he hasn't learned how to do that yet. And I think it's going to be a recurring thing. And I don't think it's just going to be related to the press conference. And I'll tell you, another thing he said that I didn't love was him asking for patience. And, asking for Patriots fans, he said, I think his exact quote was, let us do our job. And to me, that feels like he's saying, we're going to suck this year. So give us a little bit of an opportunity to figure this out. And I don't feel like this team has to suck this year or had to. I feel like there was a pathway for them to be better. And I hated that he said that because it just made me feel like this is like a throwaway season. And I've just watched 4 seasons they made the playoffs once, but 4 seasons where 3 of them, they didn't make the playoffs. I just sat through an awful 4 win or whatever season that they had. And now I feel like Mayo is setting the fandom up to say, let us do our job. We know it's frustrating. We're trying to do this right. It's like, okay, well, throw away 2024 too. See you in 2025.
I almost feel like he's intentionally setting the expectations low so that it's his comments don't change my opinion that this is still a team very well capable of 8-9 wins. Right, fighting for a wild card spot in the playoffs, like that is given their quarterback situation, given some of the what they've addressed in the middle of their roster, given the fact that they still have a top 5 defense. Hearing those comments doesn't change my opinion that this team is still capable of achieving that. Right, and I almost wonder whether he kind of thinks the same, but is almost playing a little bit of a mind game where he's setting his expectations low so that if they are a 6, 7, 8 win team, it almost looks like, oh wow, we're way ahead of schedule. The Patriots, look at how quickly Mayo was able to turn this around. Like we were expecting a multi-year rebuild. Like I don't know. I wonder if he's almost intentionally.
I don't know if he really believes it though, because like I said, I think he really believes what you believe. Like we just talked about, which is we can win some games and be respectable this year, but the way he said it, it just I don't know. It made me feel like the bar is low. I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was not a great look. It didn't really resonate. I'll tell you, and I'm speaking now as a season ticket holder and a buyer into the GP Atrium, which makes me feel like every time Mayo opens his mouth, I feel more and more like I got bamboozled by making a 7-year commitment to the GP Atrium because I don't know, I'll put it this way. I used this analogy a few minutes ago. Mayo is like a single A pitcher that just got promoted to be the opening day starter because he has a lot of talent. But he didn't do anything. He didn't pitch in Double A. He didn't pitch in Triple A.
Yep.
And to go a little further on that analogy, Elliott Wolf, he's never really done it before either. But Elliott Wolf is like a AAA player that's like ready to be promoted to the big leagues. He's got all the skills. He's got all the tools. He's had a little bit of success, in other places. This is Elliott Wolf's time to take that next step from AAA to the big leagues. Mayo skipped like 4 steps. And it does not make me feel good about where this franchise is going to be. I just feel like the more he talks, the more I feel worse about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I think we both said, back in that introductory press conference when he first got announced as the head coach, the first person whose comments, put me on red alert was Robert Kraft. The way he talked about how.
Good. Let's talk. We got to talk about him too.
Yeah, please. Let's talk about him because just from his explanation on why he even hired Gerard Mayo, I was sitting there like, that's a little weird, right? So yeah, from the very beginning, I think it's been a questionable to say the least in terms of like the commentary and that's coming out of Foxborough.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Kraft's comments at the owners meeting again, I actually, some people had big problem with what he said. I really didn't. I felt like he was honest. I feel like he's getting to the point in life where he just lets it fly and says whatever, is out there. I was fine with it. I will say this. I've been a defender of Kraft. This.
Yep.
Last few years. I didn't think it was fair for people to blame him for things that I think were Bill Belichick's fault because Bill Belichick had total control. What I will acknowledge is based on this offseason and where they have or haven't done this year, I'm starting to, I would say my antennas are up on the Kraft ownership regime. And I think it's very fair for Patriots fans to be questioning it, what they're doing. And are they really spending the money they need to spend to run the world-class, top-notch, first-class franchise that they say they are and want to be?
Right.
They have to back that up with actions. And this was their first opportunity to do that post Bill Belichick, where you didn't have Belichick to be the front man to take all the heat and blame. And they kind of, I think, didn't really do all that much. So I think it's fair to have the antennas up on the Crafts.
100%. Couldn't agree more, especially, given the fact that we were kind of hoping that they were going to, open up the bank a little bit. And I get it, I think they were just ever so slightly outbid in the Calvin Ridley. I think it came out right that the Tennessee beat them, it was really close. But again, it's like, the willingness to spend money and actually spending the money are two different things, right? Like they can say to the cows come home that they're willing to spend money, they have money to spend.
Right.
But until you actually go out and spend that money and bring these guys in here and land some contracts, and you know what? I'm at the point where it's like, dude, I'm okay if you overpay for a guy or two at this point. Like not every deal has to be the perfect deal or a bargain.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, to your point, right? They got outbid on Calvin Ridley. Kraft was very open in his comments at the coach's breakfast about his girlfriend, and I think he meant his wife because Ridley is married, so I hope he meant his wife. But his girlfriend wanted to play down south, and that was a big factor. Hey, That's all well and good. There were still good free agents available when that happened. What was that, Wednesday or Thursday that Ridley news broke? There was a lot of good players still available.
Yeah,
Jarius Sneed, Tyrion Smith, Hollywood Brown. I can make a list. There was at least 20 other players that would have filled needs and been upgrades. You got outbid on Ridley. You didn't go after anyone else?
Right. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, again, like they did say they would be willing to bring in and pay somebody like a T. Higgins or a Justin Jefferson, but neither of those guys are here. So, what, again, you can say you're willing to do it, but eventually you just got to do it.
You just got to do it. And like you said, if that means you have to overpay and you got to offer, again, I keep bringing up this name up because I think he would have been a great fit here, but Hollywood Brown went on Friday night for $11 million a year.
Exactly.
Now I can understand why Hollywood Brown wanted to go to Kansas City. He's going to be a stud. Like you talk about a fantasy sleeper, right? Put him with Mahomes in that offense.
Oh,
he's going to get back to his old form. But maybe you got to pay him $13 million a year to get him to come to Foxborough. But you do it. You got the cap room. You got the cash. You got the hole on your team. You go out and you get the player.
Yeah, I agree completely. When I saw Hollywood Brown going for a 1 year, $11 million deal, the kid's like what, 26 years old, something like that, 27 years old. I said to myself, I mean, how the hell was nobody else in the running to land this guy and give him a big contract? I mean,
he's going to be an absolute stud, I think, with Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's going to fill that Tyreek Hill void that they've been missing.
Yeah.
That quick route runner, big playmaker. I think he's going to be great as long as he can stay healthy. I know he had that Liz Frank issue with his foot last year, but I mean, if he can stay healthy, he should be unstoppable in that offense.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. He could be a real fantasy sleeper this year. And then last thing I want to talk about is the rule changes that the NFL did this year, because banning the hip drop tackle and then this like fakakta kickoff rule that they come up with. And like, look, I'm all for player safety, but at some point there's some intrinsic risk to playing the game of football, just like there's intrinsic risk to driving a truck or, being a policeman or woman, or every job has risks. And I think the sensible thing you have to do is you mitigate the risk.
Right.
You own liability. You take responsibility when someone gets hurt. You're honest. You're transparent about it. The league's come a long way in terms of all that stuff, but you can't completely legislate the risk out of the game. And I feel like the NFL the last couple of years, they've been flirting with going too far on this. And I think this was the year they really went too far, because the hip drop tackle, now you can't tackle from the hip, right? How can you tackle if you're a defensive player?
Yeah.
And then this kickoff rule is just gimmicky and weird. And I don't know. I just feel like it's a little too far.
I agree completely. I think if your goal was to, first off, when it comes to kickoffs, if your goal was to, increase the return rate and make kickoffs exciting again, I think there was a couple of things you could have done. I'm not necessarily a big fan of how they handled it, but I absolutely hate this rule, to your point about the banning the hip drop tackle. Here's my kind of take on it. On a surface level, it's clearly something that's going to hinder defenses and help offenses, right? Like, I think that's just a no-brainer. But, to put my conspiracy theory hat on for a second, what I really think this is going to do is this is going to give the referees in the NFL a lot more discretion in the ability to make these judgment calls to decide outcomes of games, in the sense that, like, I saw a stat recently after the Super Bowl. Again, this is an unrelated stat, but it was something to the tune of like Patrick Mahomes had, like, in the last like couple of years, 60 something interceptions overturned by a penalty.
Isn't that insane? That is one of the most insane stats I've ever heard in my life.
Ridiculous. And the next closest I think the next closest quarterback was at like 13. Right.
Yeah.
So
I heard that.
I look at that and I say, this is just another example for when, a Trevor Lawrence or a Patrick Mahomes or somebody that the NFL is counting on to be the face of a franchise, the face of a league, sell jerseys, sell tickets, pump them up. It's the ability to cover their butts when they make a mistake or blow a game or blow a throw. Like, that to me is the bigger issue, is that you are now leaving it up to the refs to go in and decide the outcomes of these games. And, and I just think it has the ability to be abused. It has the ability to be questioned. It has the ability to be very sneaky. And I don't think these offenses need any more help at this point.
Yeah, and like, I know a couple players have been hurt on these hip drop tackles, but like, you could say that about any number of ways of tackling and contact in the league. And how many of these things are you going to eliminate and then you whittle it down to a point where like you've completely eliminated or marginalized the physicality from the game and now fundamentally altered what the game actually is.
Yeah.
And I think this was the step, and they've been pushing and flirting to this point. Defenses have been back the last couple of years in the NFL. Statistically, scoring has been down.
Yeah.
And I am all for that. I like balanced football. I did not like, the track meet arena league shit that was happening. I like that defenses have sort of had their comeback the last few years. How is this rule? It's like the league is so desperate to engender like whatever they can do to make these teams score a ton of points. And it's like, now you put another rule in there, and it's like, is this little defensive renaissance going to continue, or has the league just really effectively stifled it, and now we're back to arena football again?
That honestly, that's what I think it is. I think this is a league where points sell, offense sells, they drive ratings, they drive they drive jersey sales, it drives revenue. I really think this is just it's a money move. It's a money move. I think this is the NFL saying, to your point, defenses have made a comeback the last few years. Offensive production has been down, specifically last year. You have a bunch of quote unquote.
But why do they think that, Justin? Why? Because like they're making money. The last 2 years, they've had record ratings, record revenues. Salary cap just went way up. Like people just like the game. It doesn't have to be arena football. Why do they think it has to be arena football?
You want to know why? Because I think this is a league that they've now seen, over the last couple of years, they saw Peyton Manning retire. They saw Tom Brady retire. They see Aaron Rodgers, on his way out, right? And they are so desperate to usher in that next wave of, franchise quarterbacks out of the face of the league. And you got guys like Trevor Lawrence that are struggling hard, that have all the expectations and hype in the world. You got guys like Justin Herbert who are struggling hard, that have all the expectations and the hype in the world. You got guys like Lamar Jackson who can't friggin' take the next step to win a playoff game. Like, there's so many guys that I think they are so desperate to make the next Brady, the next Rodgers, the next Manning, that they're willing to do whatever it takes to get these offenses to a point where they can score and they can look as good as possible. That's my honest opinion.
Right. Even if there's no basis of fact to that. Right. If you get the big numbers and the big stats, you can maybe like market that at least. Exactly. And sort of sell that to people, right, even if it's completely bogus.
Exactly. Yeah. I really do think they look at it and they say, wow, Patrick Mahomes is running away with this league, and we need some parity. We need some other guys that can step up and be big names, be big franchise guys, be faces of the league. And as of right now, other than Mahomes, nobody else has yet to do it. And I think they're trying to pave the way for some of these other guys to step up. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. All right, I think we're going to do two more topics. The non-football topic of the week. But before we get there, do we have 5 minutes to talk about the Dynasty documentary in the final 2 episodes and what your thoughts were? Because, let me tell you something. We're talking about Kraft, and after watching those last 2 episodes, again, I've defended Kraft, and I've said, I think 50 times on this podcast that you can't blame Kraft for getting rid of Brady because that was a Bill Belichick decision.
Right.
After watching those last 3 episodes of the Dynasty, I now am revisiting that take because it isn't about football.
Yeah.
It's about just basic human relationships and work environments. And Robert Kraft should have been able to see the writing on the wall of how bad it was. Because as bad as we all believe that it was from all the reporting and Seth Wickersham and everything that's come out since Brady left, I walked away from the Dynasty documentary, which, by the way, I didn't love the whole documentary as a whole. We can talk about that in a sec. But I walk away from that documentary and I say, it was worse. It was worse than what we all thought it was. It was worse than what they said. And how could Robert Kraft have believed that what Bill Belichick was doing, the culture organizationally that he had created, was going to sustain beyond Tom Brady? How could you believe that? It was impossible. It was too toxic. It was too dysfunctional. It has nothing to do with football acumen or being a football person. It's basic organizations, running an organization, basic leadership. And that's why I think Kraft should have sided with, I can say now, you can look back and say, maybe Kraft should have sided with Brady in that, because he should have known that it was going to fall apart because it was too toxic what Belichick had built.
Yeah. I mean, first off, I definitely think that the dynasty was a hit piece aimed at Bill Belichick, right? Like, I think that's kind of abundantly clear, right? And
told half the story. It told half the story.
It told half the story. And I think, I don't know, did you see Matthew Slater's comments on Julian Edelman's podcast the other day?
Basically, I did. Slater, I saw McCourty, I saw Harrison.
Right. Basically coming out and saying that, hey, the version that they showed in the documentary, it was a little slanted because there's, Bill was just as much responsible for the greatness as anybody. So to make it seem like he was, the sole reason for the downfall and he was this and he was that and nobody could stand. I mean, they really did. A documentary really overplayed that angle, I think. And I don't think it was fair. What I will say is that I think there was some grasping at straws. I feel like, I think there was, the whole trying to paint the narrative that Bill Belichick was responsible for the Aaron Hernandez situation. I think that was crazy, right? I think dedicating like 20 minutes of an episode to the fact that Bill Belichick and Donald Trump were friends, like that, and that was the reason why the Patriots collapsed. Like, I think that was kind of a reach to take, right? Like the whole going back and forth about his relationship with Brady and Kraft. Like, I think they did everything they could to grasp at every straw they could and to play up all of the bad. And honestly, I at the end of the day, like, what was there some entertaining moments in the documentary? Yes. Like, did I watch the entire thing? Yes. But I really do feel like the Patriots legacy got cheated a little bit with that documentary, because I think they.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you a perfect example of what you're saying, right? Which is like the whole Alex Guerrero thing.
Exactly.
And
right.
That was like put completely on Bill Belichick. And there's a whole other side to that story, which is that if you're trying to run a football team and you've got a trainer that is going in there and giving advice that is completely contradictory to the advice that your professional staff is giving, I'm sorry, that's a problem. That's a problem. And that was not represented fairly, right? And that's just one little thing. You could go episode by episode and you could find glaring omissions where they only told half the story. So yeah, I watched it. It was entertaining, but I just felt like anyone that's actually lived the history could see that this was very slanted, very biased, and really missing a lot of the other side of things sometimes.
Exactly. And you know what? At the end of the day, I think I came away with it, I came away with the same opinion that I kind of always had, which is Belichick is flawed. He's not perfect, but I think he was a great coach. I think he was just as responsible for why we were a great organization and why we won championships. And I think they tried to take that away from him. But I still came out of it thinking the same thing. He was an imperfect guy with flaws, but there's no question about it. We were better off with him than without him during that run.
It is. And, Justin, to the credit of most of the people that watched it, I think that paradoxically, Belichick almost emerges from that as a sympathetic figure. And it actually made the Krafts look bad. Not to say that I don't think they were responsible. People have tried to put this on them. I don't think they were responsible for it. But I think that, it made Belichick almost look sympathetic. I knew the documentary was going off the rails. I think I said this on one of the previous episodes when they literally spent 3 minutes talking about 2003 and 2004 season.
Yeah.
And I said, there's 7 episodes left. And what are you going to fill with 7 episodes if you're not going to talk about 21 wins and they hate their coach and Super Bowl wins and becoming a dynasty. If you're not going to tell any of that story, like how are you going to fill the remaining 7 hours of time? And it was with, it was with scandal and innuendo and everything bad. So overall, again, yes, entertaining, watched it. Don't think it was historically accurate, and maybe that wasn't necessarily the goal, but but I thought it was a hit piece.
It was. And the last thing I'll say too, because I know, obviously if you've watched it now, spoiler alert, there was the whole episode about Malcolm Butler and, we never actually got a valid answer or reason for what happened to Malcolm Butler. Malcolm claims he doesn't know, but the one thing that I thought was very telling from that episode was when Kraft used that is like going into the following year, Kraft made a comment about how going into that Rams Super Bowl, he had his eye on Bill and he was extra vigilant because of what had transpired in the previous year. Right. And to me, I'm thinking, well, I think it's more telling the fact that you don't know what happened, or you're not willing to, you don't have an idea of what happened with Malcolm Butler. Like the fact that he's sitting there going, well, I had to keep my eye on Bill for this upcoming Super Bowl. Like that tells me that like, you're just as clueless as the rest of us as to what potentially happened with him. Because if there was some sort of valid reason, or if there was, something that explained what happened, I would expect Robert Kraft to know about that. And kind of silently, I guess, how should I put it? Like, I guess what I'm saying is when he made that comment about needing to keep his eye on Bill, I thought that was a very weird indicator because it told me that Kraft himself didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. And I thought it was, I think it's crazy that, to this day, we still don't have an explanation for the Malcolm Butler thing. It will go down as one of the most bizarre and just like hard to figure out things.
And I honestly, I came away from that actually in a weird, I guess counterintuitive way. I came out of that with more respect for Belichick because here's how I look at it. All these years later, Malcolm Butler, he just retired. He's retired. He's got nothing to lose. If he even had an inkling of what he did, right, and he was innocent, or he didn't do anything that bad, I would be telling people, okay? But for him to sit there and deny, and say, I don't know, I got no clue, I don't know, that to me tells me that he probably did something stupid that he doesn't want to own up, or he doesn't want light shed on that. And the fact that Bill has sat there.
So you don't believe Malcolm Butler was being forthright? I
don't believe he was being forthright at all. And the fact that Bill has kept his mouth shut through all the criticism, right, through all the bull crap, and he's never once came out and said, look, you guys want to know why I made that decision? Because Malcolm did something stupid, or Malcolm was a piece of crap, or he violated this, or he did that. Like the fact that he's never once came out and said,
do you know what the strangest thing about the whole Go ahead. Sorry.
No. It's it almost, to me, I came away from that being like, Malcolm Butler knows what he did. He did something wrong, something messed up. And Bill is still covering for his ass after all these years, doesn't want to throw him under the bus, doesn't want to bring it to public light what happened.
Yeah. And the strangest thing about all of it is that after all that, like 3 years later, he came back here. They signed him.
Exactly.
Like 3 years later. That is just so like, it's so bizarre. That if there's something like that, and we'll never know what it is, I guess. Yeah. He got another opportunity here in a $500,000 bonus to come play. It's like crazy. Right. All right, let's wrap this up, Justin, with the non-football topic of the week. This is a good one. Okay. Elon Musk, Starship, supposedly going to Mars in 2029. What is the probability, in your estimation, that the people that make that first journey to Mars are making it back to Earth? Because what's your number? Like you go on that thing, like, come on, like you can't expect that you're coming back, right?
That's to me, that's going to be the Titans sub 2.0, the thing that went down to you know what I mean? Like that is just red flags written all over it. I'll tell you what, I would make damn well sure that has made plenty of successful trips before I volunteered to be in the first flight. Like that is.
Here's the thing. I don't know if you know this, but here's the thing. You get a window every 3 years to make the trip to Mars. It's a 3-year window. So there's the one in 2026. They don't think they're going to make it.
Yeah.
And then the next one is 2029. That's the one they're shooting for, right? And that's just because the ellipses of the planets only line up where you can actually do it once every 3 years. So if something goes wrong, you can't just turn around and come back. You have to wait like another 3 years for your opportunity. So it's a 6-month journey there. And then once you're on Mars, they have to make it work for 3 years. They can't just be like, oh, this is, we couldn't grow the crops. We got to, we're going to turn around and blast off home.
Yeah.
It's not going to work like that.
No.
There is no friggin' way that on the first time they try that, they're going to be able to stay on Mars for 3 years. No friggin' way. I'd put it at less than 5%.
No, I think
hate to say it.
I totally agree. I think you're a brave soul if you volunteer to be on that. But no, I think something's inevitably going to go wrong. And if it's not, like to your point, if it's not necessarily in the voyage there, it's going to be during that 3-year stretch. Something will happen.
Because I'll guarantee you this, like, I bet you they'll make it there. I guarantee you they'll make it there. Like they're going to have like you said, they're going to run the Starship rocket. They just had another test that the thing blew up, but they said it was a successful test. They're going to work out the kinks and they're going to get it up there. And once you get it up there, there's nothing up there. It's a vacuum. So you get up there and it's going to be fine. They're going to probably land on Mars. But there's no way those poor people are coming back. I'm sorry. There's no way they're going to last 3 years and then make the 6-month journey home. I think it's completely, I hate to say it, God bless the people that have the guts to do that. Not me, because I can barely JetBlue it to Florida. Like, I just don't see it happening. I really don't.
No, me neither. I think it takes a special kind of person to do that. I mean, you just really must have no fear, or you have to have no fear or an irrational amount of faith in it. So I don't know what it is, but yeah, you wouldn't catch me dead on one of those things. I think it's, totally.
What's the mentality of someone that wants to go to Mars? Like, what do you think? I mean, I want to see it happen. Like, I would love to see it happen in my lifetime, but I can't understand why anyone would do it.
I think it's going to be a combination of dumb, a little bit of blind faith, a little bit of ego. I mean, to be one of the first people to do that, I think has to be the motivating factor behind a lot of these people, right? To have their name etched in history, like that's got to be it, Yeah.
But
yeah.
That is what it is. But it's like, I mean, man, 6 months in a spaceship. That is brutal. That is just brutal. All right. Any other thoughts, Justin, on this topic, or anything else, bud, before we wrap it up?
No, that's it. I just, I hope it gets a little warmer out, and yeah, draft day. What draft days? What's the official date?
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 weeks from tonight.
4 weeks from tonight. So
a long 4 weeks.
Yep, 100%. Well, yeah. Hopefully, we go into draft night with a couple more pieces in the roster. That's all I got to say, because I think there's still some trade windows that are open.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I mean, they got 4 weeks to make something happen. So,
yeah. We got the Bruins and the Celtics going too. So let's not forget about them. Right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So
awesome. All right, brother. That's all the time we have. We're going to wrap it up. We want to thank everyone that listened or watched the Dr. Football podcast. Keep your eye open for our content on Facebook and some of the other social media platforms. Find us on Spotify and iTunes, and we'll be back in probably 2 weeks, record another episode. We'll have a few other pieces of content to drop between now and then. So check us out and have a great week, everyone.